So, welcome everybody to episode two. It's me and Isaac again, and we are going to be going through the Korean film Parasite. Now, this was a recommendation by Isaac. I had not seen the film. It came out, am I right in thinking it was just after
I
COVID?
had not seen it either. I'd
What,
never
you
seen
hadn't
it as
seen it?
either. No, I had not. It was one of the first ones on the list that I hadn't seen, so I chose it as
Ah,
well.
I did not know. I thought you'd seen it. Yeah, because I'm sure it popped up around COVID time when everyone was sort of still home. But it went over my head. What was the one that everybody was watching with a woman, Sandra Bullock, and the bird something? Do you remember that was around COVID time as well, and everybody watched it? Bird.
Oh God.
Remember, there's like demons in the world, and you've got to wear like a blindfold.
Oh, oh, was that like Quiet or something like that, or Silence,
No,
or
yeah, there's a similar film about sound, but this one was about visual. So yeah, so anyway, it came out
yeah, I
around
didn't
that
see that.
time, and it went over my head, and I missed it. I watched it last night, and I rewatched it again today. I've made some notes, so I guess cool thing would be, what's your take?
I mean, it ranked up there as one of the best movies I've ever seen. I thought it was just phenomenal. I've seen some of his other movies. Joon-ho. I've seen Snowpiercer. I absolutely hated that movie. I thought it was terrible. And this one I just thought was just perfect. Right? I thought it was really well done and kind of everything that you look for in a movie. Right? There's moral there. There's ethics. There's class divide. There's character development. I mean, everything that you're looking for is there. It's beautifully filmed. Really wrapping in genres, really putting an artistic spin to the movie. I mean, it just had all the elements, and they all clicked, right? I mean, the only thing that's really the drawback to why people aren't, more fascinated, I would say, is just because the topic is, in my opinion, probably not. It doesn't appeal. It's a sad story. It doesn't appeal to the masses, right? It's more difficult for people to want to see something that upsets them, and I think that is probably the only harm that the film does to itself. But he's trying to really bring this to the surface, and I thought he just did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. I watched it through last night, and then, like I say, I watched it again today. The thing that hits you straight away is the cinematography. I mean, the shot types and selection, and the way that the cinematography crosses over into the sort of narrative thread. So you've got stairs. People go upstairs, and the wealthy people are upstairs, and then all the people are who are not wealthy are at basement level. I think whoever was director of photography in conjunction with that director, they sat down and they smashed out what they were going to do, and they absolutely did it. So I've got a
So
question for you.
he's he does. It's actually kind of interesting because as a director, he's very different in his approach. A lot of directors will set up multiple cameras and shoot the same scene from different angles and then choose the one that they like that fits the film artistically, right? He, on the other hand, he storyboards the entire film ahead of time. So every single shot is arranged by him. So he uses only one camera when he takes that shot. In fact, the entire set that they built of the house is was built specifically for the movie. That house didn't exist.
Ah,
And
right.
he
So
built
it was a set.
it was a set that he built just so he could get the camera angles that he had originally storyboarded. I mean, it's just
That
incredible.
that makes sense because lots of the shots are very wide and quite far back. And if it was in an actual house, you'd be hitting walls and things. So yeah, that makes sense now. They're framing the shots from much further back to get those lovely wide angles. But question for you, something that came up when I was watching it again this morning was, so the film is entitled Parasite. Now, I didn't know anything about it when I went into it. So I had an idea that this was going to be a Korean sort of gory slasher horror kind of weird demonic something like that. I didn't realize it was going to be what it was. My question is, who is the parasite?
Exactly. Yeah, I actually read a little bit after I watched it. So beforehand, I didn't, aside from just the synopsis of the film. Like you, I went in blind thinking, let's give this movie its shot to watch it maybe as the director intended, right? And so, I did the same thing. And then I read up afterwards, but we also had that same discussion. I watched it with my wife and my daughter's a big movie buff and really has a good interpretation of movies. So, watching that was the first time for all of us. So we all talked about it afterwards. And that's exactly what came to the surface. Why is it called Parasite? Because they are parasites, but the real parasites are the rich, right? It's the rich that can't possibly live their, like, can't raise their kids, they can't clean their house, they can't cook, right? They can't even drive their cars without taking the lives away of those who serve them. And so to me, like, they are the greater parasites there. And because, it's, I mean, technically it's both ways. They're both parasitic. It's a parasitic relationship for both of them. So it's
Yeah.
interesting he didn't call it parasites, plural, but maybe it lost something in the translation as well. So, but yeah, that is a fascinating thought of like, who really is the parasite in this? Because it's really a symbiotic relationship, right? I mean, it's a
Yeah.
broken symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah, they at first glance, obviously, you would think the poor family are the parasites, and then when you start thinking deeper into the film, you can start leaning towards the wealthy family. But just as you said, it's a symbiotic relationship. They both need each other. They both deride each other for their class and status, but they're both dependent on each other to sort of survive. And I think that came across beautifully. There was no that I mean, it follows the poorer family that come into the home more than it follows the wealthy family. But I wouldn't really say that. Um, I wouldn't really say that it's the story is about the poor family as much as it's about both. So yeah, they have a symbiotic relationship, and the story is about both sides of that coin. And I think he did that. He did it fantastically. Um, yeah. So the first thing the first thing that came to mind when I started watching it, so I started making some notes as the film went on. So I'm gonna have a look at it sort of chronologically as the film. So the dad's character, the dad in the basement at the beginning, it was really interesting how his progression. So from the beginning, he was kind of a little bit of a drip character. He didn't seem very intelligent, and he was just bumbling through life. You get hints that he'd made mistakes, and the family were impoverished because of things he'd possibly done. And he was quite funny. He had his whole persona was kind of funny. That he'd make little statements, and whether he knew or not, they were quite funny. Um, and that seemed to be something that progressed as the film progressed. So his character developed, and then as you get right to the end, then he was laser focused. He knew what he wanted to do. He had a plan. One thing that I found interesting is the the poor family, when they go into the wealthy family's home, they're all really good at their jobs. So they're Walter Mitty's in that they're pretending, but they're actually really good as well. And I thought that was kind of interesting. The English tutor seemed to be fantastic at what he was doing. The art girl, even though she was blagging it, the housekeeper was fantastic at her job. He was an amazing driver. I thought that was really interesting that they like an American or British film might have thrown in elements there where he bumps the car or the mother cooks the food wrong. No, they are really good at their job, and I think that leans in possibly towards that sort of Asian idea of like perfection within everything you do. So even though they're sort of making it up and they're going as along, for the ride and seeing if they can blag it as much as possible, they're also really good at what they're doing. So yeah, what were you thinking from the beginning?
Yeah, I mean that never even occurred to me. That's a brilliant thought. And I kind of wonder if it goes with, hand in hand with. Well, I mean, we can get to this later of the fact that after the film, my wife says like the poor were a lot more violent, and you dislike them more at the end of the movie because they take these actions that are aggressive, violent, and they murder, right? So it leads back to the fact that that really I think it's the based on the necessity of things. So it's the necessity of life, right? You're starving, you're going to make it happen, right? And maybe you put more effort into your work because you're more dependent on the outcome of it. One thing it never elaborated on was Mr. Park, whether he was very successful in his career, right? Yes, he was rich, he probably ran the company, but you didn't know whether he was any good at it, right? And
Yeah,
so I
agreed.
agree with you. Like that, he did put in this highlight of them being very good at what they did. Even the mother who comes in can just all of a sudden whip up fantastic meals and preparation where before they're just kind of slopping stuff together in the kitchen. Um, so maybe he was trying to say that necessity makes you that much better, but he never
Yeah.
addressed whether or not Park was happy with his job, let alone good at his job.
Yeah, because a few times he asks about loving his wife. He's asking him about does he love his kind of, and there's quiet pauses, and you're seeing whether the wealthy man is gonna sort of be angry or deride him, but he's thinking about these things. He's thinking about his life. You can see it behind his eyes. Um, but yeah, it was a lot going on there, isn't there? There's a lot going on, and I mean the symbolism in the film is one of the things that a thread that goes through it is this idea of smell.
Yeah,
So they're able to convince the family that they're a driver and an English teacher and an art teacher, but there's always this idea that there's an underlying smell going on, that there's scenes where they're sniffing at things and think, and they're like, they're not sure something isn't sitting right for this family, and it comes through as that sense of smell. And I thought that was a fantastic little bit to add in.
yeah. Well, and it goes back to, I mean, the whole thing was, yeah, that you just can't wash away the stench of poverty, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember or not, but when we worked together at the camp, there was a kid there whose mother had won the lottery, and one of the other kids referred to him as new money. He's like, well, he's new money. Right, and so it's exactly right. He couldn't wash the stench of the poverty off of him, right? And so yeah, that was glorious. That as much as you could try to be in that wealthy class, it is a different world, and you can't hide your roots. Is I think what it's really didn't matter where it came from. It was the stench that he could not rinse off. And it's funny because if we go back to your first part about Park never saying like he loves his wife, and he always, did you notice like he refers to his wife and her to him as the son's father and the son's mother. They're like,
Oh
oh well,
no,
so
I
and
know.
so's mother, and she would go, oh, so and so's father, and it's like, wait a minute, you're both the parents. Why are you
Yeah.
referring to each other as the so and so's father, so and so's mother? And every time he caught him on that, he just kind of, like you said, he paused when he says like, oh well, you love your wife, and he just stops. And I think it goes to the fact that he's saying that the rich class just have no empathy for anybody, right?
Mm.
They are solely about themselves. They don't care about anything. This whole movie is really, that's their cardinal sin. And as much as you want to look at the violence of the poverty of them fighting against each other, the fact remains is that the rich really are committing the greater sin because they just have no care for anybody, right?
Yeah.
I mean, basically they care for their son, but you don't really know how much because they're not helping him directly. I got to hire somebody. I got to hire this. I got to hire that. I got to bring other people in order to take care of my son and raise him, right? And he seems to have issues, but they seem to want to address it in their own kind of roundabout way. I don't know. It just seemed like they were just completely disconnected from humanity in general, right? They were less human because they, maybe that owns back to the parasite. They really can't, take that step of really understanding somebody else, even their own spouse, which is weird. Why he wouldn't say my wife, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I never considered that. I mean, the thread that links the thread that links the two parents together is the children, with the son in particular, because they mention the son having problems, and by problems they seem to mean he doesn't sort of toe the line of the ideal quiet, bowing son. He's a little bit free spirited and he does his own thing. But yeah, like you said, the link between the mother and the husband seems to be the son, and the conversation about either one goes through the son, where they refer to the other person. Yeah, that's really interesting, and I guess that shows a disconnect between the husband and wife that you see and you hear about with wealthy, powerful people, where you can't really attain that without the sacrifice of the family. I mean, the father, he definitely makes an effort with the son. He's trying with the son. At the end, where he dresses up as the American Indian and he allows the son to go outside in the tent and sleep out there. But it seems a little bit more about buying his love. Like, the son wants to do this, and if I allow him to do this, then he might love me a little bit more, or he might have a connection to me. But there's not the father son relationship, which always includes chastising and stopping them doing things. So it's more transactional. It seems like a transactional relationship because of that distance between them that the father has inadvertently done through being what we assume to be successful as a businessman. And the mother, then, you lean on the other side. The mother is full of worry and full of trepidation about her boy's behavior and about her daughter and her English. And she's helicoptering. She's trying to iron out the issues of the children through the third parties, so through the housekeeper, through the driver, through the tutors. And yeah, it's such an interesting perspective on the dynamics of families, how they relate to class and wealth. Um, I've spoken about with friends before. Somebody from my church, we were chatting, and you know, he said about we were talking about money and what money can do, and there's no amount of money that can replace you being there. There's no amount of money that can replace that connection you have with your children. Um, but then again, money does buy things. Money does keep a roof over your head. Money does buy a car and pay for the groceries and the gas bill and the electric bill. So, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking about my own circumstances in my life, and I'm not poor, but I'm also not rich. Um, I would say I have what I need. Um, so I'm always, thinking about striking up that balance of, if I strive for a career and try and work really hard, I won't be there. And my children right now are 10 and 6, so they're only going to be 10 and 6 once. And if I miss that, then then I could end up like the wealthy father. I'd have the material wealth, but I'd miss the connection. And then you swing it all the way across to the other side, and the family at the beginning, they're living in a basement, they're living hand to mouth, but they're all connected. They're all there next to each other. They're on top of each other, and they seem happy regardless of the lack of financial means. And I think as the film progresses, you can see that they want they see a glimpse into that wealthy life and they want a little piece of that. It's like, oh, I'd love a piece of this life. And again, like we spoke about in Midnight in Paris, it's rose tinted glasses. If you took them and brought them all the way back to the beginning of the film, they seemed happy. They didn't have stuff, but they seemed happy. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, and they care about each other, right? Even when he gets into the house, he immediately starts, they immediately start planning about how to bring each other in, right? And so you're right. They work as a team and cooperatively, where you never see that with Mr. Park and his
no,
wife, right? Even the sex scene is just awkward, right? It's
yeah,
just like, it's so awkward that you're just like, what in the hell's going on here, right? And it's just, yeah, it's a, if we go back to the fact, I mean, I think it really brings, it's the necessity. It's like you said, I have everything you need. I went back and watched The Aviator, parts of it the other day, and there's a great scene where he's with the Hepburn family, and the Hepburn family are sitting there just kind of putting him in his place, bullying him, and he finally snaps when they say the question, well, this family doesn't care about money, right? And he stops them and says, that's because you've always had it.
yeah.
And
That's a
he's
great
like,
line.
yeah, he's like, you don't
Mm,
understand the value of money because you've always had it. Those of us
yeah,
that have had to work every day of our life have a different opinion of what money is. And it goes right to this movie, right? Is that that scene is beautiful where they're sitting there eating all the stuff of the Park family, and she's like, well, if I had money, I'd be nice too. And she says this as the dog's coming up just to try to eat from the scrap, and she shoves it away. Right?
yeah,
It's like perfect. And it's like so true, and it goes back, to the founding of ethics and morality and what Socrates said, which is, basically, I'm paraphrasing here, but morality, the lack of morality is only driven by ignorance, right? That if you actually had intelligence, you would be moral and always choose the best choice for all parties involved, right? The optimal choice. And he says that's the problem, is that if you don't have an understanding of that other person or their situation, something like that, then you will do the unethical, right? And that's exactly what, the other family does, is they do the unethical by becoming parasites, by getting other people's jobs terminated, by being violent, even though the housekeeper's husband begins attacking them. Why? Because it's like they are fighting for their survival, right? And it's no longer about what everybody wants or needs. It's, do I want to continue to exist, and I'm going to starve if I don't do something drastic. And it was just, so if I go back to my point about, like, at the end of the movie, you really don't like the poor family and the individuals in there, because they are so violent, both of them, right? Even the woman's husband, like, you don't like any of them, but it's kind of showing you that they're acting out of instinct, right? And I thought that was just perfect. I thought that just wrapped it up perfectly to what drives the dichotomy between the wealth and the poor, is that
yeah,
you have that the feeling of, will I make it tomorrow? Will I make it to tomorrow? Versus, what am I gonna have for breakfast tomorrow? I mean, I don't really care. Like, I can eat whatever I want, right? Or it's the other one. It's like, will we even be eating, right? So it was yeah, it's just perfect.
yeah. One thing that I've been thinking about for days, and it relates to this this film in some ways, is I just recently read Cormac McCarthy's The Road. Viggo Mortensen was in a film. Did you read the book or see the film?
Yeah, I didn't read the book, but I watched the film, and that's brutal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, obviously, I mean, I want to start. One thing that often comes up is this idea of the book being better than the film. The book is different to the film because in a film you can't have the same things that come across in a book. But so I've not seen the film, but I read the book. And one thing that struck me when you're looking at poverty and ethics and real desperation the book leans really heavily on the idea of of moral right and wrong. You know, this idea that, so in the book, it's eating people is the big bad. You know, you've got the post-apocalyptic world. Nothing's growing. There's no plants. There's no animals. I don't know whether that comes across as well in the film, but it doesn't. It doesn't implicitly state that that happens, but that seems to be what's happened. There's been a nuclear winter, and everything has stopped. So, you know, they're looking for cans of food, but they're essentially all starving to death, living day by day. And this I this idea kept popping into my head about it. Are we predisposed to look after people and take care of people and think about other people's wishes and worry about what they want, their needs, or does it only take 3 meals where you haven't eaten and we all revert to that animal state? The road is interesting because the way that McCarthy set the book is that there is nothing in the world. The world is lifeless, so it takes away the choice to some degree. But this idea that you are this is just in your nature, that all it takes is being hungry to bring that out. And I think, you know, when I was watching this film, I was thinking about that as well. You know, they don't. There are it implies there are scenes implied that they are struggling to eat every day, and then, you know, this is affecting their thoughts and their actions, because it's the poor family. They aren't accidentally getting into this situation. They are making plans. They are actively working towards doing that to this family. So yeah, it's just, I was thinking about this idea of morality and ethics, and at our heart, what do we become if we're hungry? What do we become if we don't have shelter? So yeah, it's fab idea.
Yeah, and and there's even a scientific basis behind it that when you do have starvation in the brain starts making more questionable choices, right?
Yeah,
Because then it needs to lose that. I mean, and you've seen that, and you're right. It goes back to animalistic tendencies. I remember working in the lab and dealing with mice. Sometimes you'd come in to a litter that the mother had just birthed a litter of babies, and she would eat them, right? And it just like showed you like, oh my god, right? I mean, that it really takes your compassion as a human being away from animals when you see an animal act in such a way, and you're like, how could you, right? You had all the food and water you needed. Why in the hell would you eat your children?
yeah,
And but then we see the same thing in times of war and starvation, right? That people struggle, and they will sometimes not necessarily eat their children, but sacrifice their children for their own health, right? So, I mean, I think when you become destitute, the morality of humanity breaks down, right? And
yeah,
that's why that's why you and I might have. I mean, I know that's why I have a fascination with zombie films, right?
yeah,
Because it's always, and that's The Walking Dead, the series kind of nailed it. It's fear the living, right? It's like, exactly, it's not the dead you have to fear, it's the living. And they even, when the human mind breaks down and morality breaks down, that's when you really have to fear, right? That's when you have to fear every interaction you have with somebody, are that you just automatically start assuming it's going to be negative because they've been surviving in such a world for so long. And
yeah,
that's, I think that goes with the Parasite, is that this family has been poor and destitute. The Kim family has been poor and destitute their entire existence. And so they're at the point now where that morality, they don't even hesitate before. They're just like, oh, well, let's get this person fired and bring in, my dad. Let's get this person fired and bring in my mom. It's like there's no hesitation there because those fabrics of morality have completely eroded off of them, right?
yeah,
And it's sad to me because the Park family, the Ridge family, doesn't even notice, right? They don't care. They it doesn't even occur to them to even question, right? How could you have a housekeeper working in your house for 2 or 3 years and never once inquire about her husband, who's living in the basement, right? And they don't know.
Well, I think that goes back to when you see the basement and they pull the cabinet across, your first thought, or my first thought, is how have they not noticed that this is in the basement? But then, as the film ends and I'm sitting thinking about it, they have no real need to go to the basement. The basement is a level that they don't need to interact with. So for me and you,
Oh,
you know every corner of your house, don't you? And so do I. Every
right.
nook and cranny in this house. But if your hierarchy of needs work at a different level, you don't need I don't even need to interact with my garden or the basement or the attic. But be, because the family have so much, they have so much surplus. It's easy for them not to notice that there's a whole in room downstairs. You know, it's wild, isn't it? So you're putting. I feel I was putting my. I was walking in my shoes while I was watching that scene, and then only after I sat down thinking about it, I thought, no, it's their house. I need to walk in their shoes. Yeah, I probably would never have gone in that basement. You know, interesting.
Yeah, well, you linked it, I think, exactly to the purpose of this entire podcast, right? Viewing movies from different cultural perspectives. And that can be cultural, such as nationality, right? You growing up in England, you have a different take on British and Welsh films, and you'll like them a lot more because they appeal to your own culture. And the same with me in American films. And that's what I loved about this film. Being Korean films, every time I sit down to a foreign film, I have to analyze it kind of differently, right? I have to shut off
Yeah.
my own, you know, predilection towards American film and culture and be like, okay, but this is a different culture. And so one thing I wanted to talk to you about was, you know, I think you hit it on the head with like, well, they're a higher culture, so they're not even going to be thinking of those other levels. And that never even occurred to me. But another thing that I think both of us have to take into consideration, since neither of us are from a Korean culture, is the colors and the contrasts that are used a lot of times in these films, right? We have a different interpretation of what that color means when you put it on film. And so when you put something with a different hue, and my daughter notices this immediately, right? Is as soon as the whole aspect changes and she's like, oh, they changed the color, that they did it for a reason, right? Why did
Yeah.
they change the coloring of that film? And the first one was all the basement scenes have a green tone to them,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I didn't even notice that. And if you ask like Americans and you say, well, what does the color green mean to you? They'll say money, you know, wealth, you know,
Yeah.
rich, like, you know, but it's just the opposite in Korea. Green
Yeah.
actually means poverty in Korea, I found out.
Okay.
So I thought that was cool.
Ah.
Orange, right? When they're running through the streets and it's pouring down rain, all the street lights are orange, showing this like a golden orange, you know, glow as they're running back home. And it's like the washing of the rich life off of them as they go back and find their home,
Ah.
because that's the gold means rich, right? That's wealth to the Koreans. So
I
as they're
get you.
running through the streets, it's all golden and everything, but it's pouring
Yeah.
down rain, and they get home and immediately goes back green, and it's
Do you know
like
one
all
thought?
your hopes.
One thought about that. Well, let me just jump in. Is and your daughter's going to be watching this. When the housekeeper gets fired, and I wrote this down. When the housekeeper gets fired, she walks outside and she walks away from the house. The color changes, completely changes in that shot. So it goes to like a dark, washed out sort of bluey color, a bit like your jacket. And I wrote that down straight away. I thought that's really interesting how the color is switched here, you know. But yeah, I never knew that about Korean culture and the idea of yeah, color. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and it, yeah, it just goes back that lots of times people, I think, don't sense the appreciation of the films at first because they might be shot with a different cultural aspect. And that's the whole point of movies, is how do they talk to you, right? What experiences do you draw off of them that makes you, you know, relate to them, that makes you like them, that makes you enjoy them, that says like that was poignant because you
Yeah.
can see it because you've had the experiences to understand it. Whereas somebody, you know, I would imagine a rich person might see this movie and be like, this is the dumbest movie I've ever seen,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
who
Makes no
cares
sense.
about this stupid? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, I think both of us, we grew up. I mean, I think all these videos is going to be us talking about nostalgia when we were young, isn't it, at some point? But
Yeah.
we grew up in a world where people didn't really have a great deal of stuff. In the 1980s when we were kids, and then as you progress through life and you own your own house and things, you start to move. I mean, in the UK, we have the idea of class system is a little bit different to the United States. And again, that's talking about what you mentioned earlier about the differences between cultures. So here, there's still very much an underlying class system. So I was raised very much working class. So my father was an electrician, my mother was a dinner lady in a school, and we didn't have any money growing up. And our house was only half finished up until I was sort of 15, 16. And then as time progressed and we were able to get onto the property ladder, we sort of transitioned then to moving into a different class. And we live in a nice area now of the city. So like you're saying, for me, I can see from both sides of the coin. I mean, I'm not a multi-millionaire like this guy, but I've got that idea of moving through classes. And it's that I've walked a mile in that guy's shoes. I've been in situations where I'm thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow. I'm absolutely screwed. And then I've been in situations where everything's fine, and I don't have to think about the bills, and I don't have to think about money. So yeah, it's like you said, you're watching it you're watching everything from your own personal perspective. And yeah, it'd be interesting to know what the director's sort of upbringing was. Whether he was raised in poverty, because that's going to affect his ideas about shot types and narrative direction. So that's something that I'd be interested to look at, is to see what the director's background was.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't look that up, but I would agree. I'd be curious as to, what I mean, all of his films focus on the divide between usually the rich and the poor, but different classes especially. But I know exactly what you mean when, your background it gets you to understand the perspective of that film, and the same way with me. Like I have, part of my job earlier was to work with one of my CEOs who was, very high up, very high class, even was born from rich, high class people. So he had lived a wealthy life his entire life. And I mean, I immediately related him to Mr. Park in this. I mean, it was like, it was perfect. It was like, that's exactly who he was. He had no idea about my upbringing, my life, or I mean, that was what was worse. They don't have any care to know. It's just like not only do they not know, they don't want to know. It just does not factor into that. And so it is a different almost breed of people that people, commonly say that and say, oh, that's a very different, they're a high class. Well, that's, I've seen it, right? I've seen that and have that impression. And so this movie really spoke to that for me. I was like, that's true. When they have that level of wealth, they just really turn off the empathy receptors for anybody below. Because, I guess it's almost kind of like even in some of the racing movies, like, talk about like Days of Thunder and stuff, which is, probably not, a cinematic classic. But regardless, the fact that Tom Cruise didn't want to see, the issues that Rowdy Burns was encountering with his mind after such a violent accident, and the explanation was like, well, he doesn't want to know what can happen to him in that car because it makes him less aggressive of a driver, right? And I think it's the same way. If you were super wealthy, you wouldn't want to know what it's like to be poor, because then you wouldn't be able to interact with the other wealthy people at your level. Right, and you would
And
not
I mean,
be able to.
It goes back to what you were saying about the symbiotic relationship. I'm employed by wealthy people. You're employed by wealthy people. We're all employed by wealthy people. So as much as we can see that they're disconnected from our perspective and perspectives of other people, we need those people. We need people to start businesses. We need people to focus on those things, you know. So it's this idea that it would, you know, this idea that we get in society today of class being a problem, or the divide between rich and poor. Yes, it would be great if we could level the playing field more, and I think we should strive more and more to do that. But we need wealthy people to take risks and to open businesses, and we focus a lot on the success, you know, the people who are successful at this, but we don't see the people who take the jump off the cliff and lose it all. You know, they put $40 million into a company and it gets wiped out, and they're back to zero. You know, so yeah, it's like you're saying, it's this this idea that we have this symbiotic relationship. You know, and there will always be people who are poorer than you, and there will always be people wealthier than you, and it's finding a way that we can all play a role in society, and be judged on our merit and our ability rather than, you know, at what position we landed at.
Right.
And the beauty of the society, the Korean society, our society, is there is mobility. There is mobility in it. I mean, if me and you today just decided that we're going to not focus on our family and we are going to try and make $10 million within 5 years, we would almost certainly get close to there, you know, if that was our goal, that was our focus. So, you know, we're very lucky that we live in a society that has these differences. Yeah. One question. We're getting close to the end now. The last act of the film, how did you find it? So the the dad is they're in the party at the end, the very end of the film, and the stabbing scenes. What was your take on all of that?
So my take, I don't know what from what perspective you're asking, but
So how it
I mean,
fitted within the whole narrative, and you know how it came to a head and it concluded with the murders and the yeah.
I think it was, yeah. Well, I think it was Mr. Kim's final realization that he was rock bottom and was never going to advance above that, right? I mean, you see
Yeah.
that when he goes down to that basement and he meets the guy locked in the basement. He says, like, how in the world could you want to ever live like this? How, you know, you are nothing more than a cockroach, right? That
Yeah.
you are just. And when he resigns himself back down there to take his place, it's his own acceptance of the fact that that's me, right? I mean, once he
Yeah.
crosses the barrier of murder and he's like, okay, now I've really done the unthinkable, he finally accepts his fate that he is nothing more than a cockroach, right? And
Yeah.
that was just
I
that was
agree.
powerful but sad, right? And it's not a happy ending movie for certain. And you know, and that's you find that a lot with Korean movies, that they do have a lot of movies with bad endings, such as like Old Boy and other types of movies. But you know, and sometimes they have happy endings, but sometimes they don't. Chinese films almost always end unhappy, right? And bad, right? Because it's like we said, different cultures have different values, right?
Yeah.
So I thought it was fascinating to see when he finally takes the final insult and he says, you know, when the guy starts like smelling and he just can't get the keys because the guy stinks, it's the final insult to Mr. Kim and he loses it and breaks down, but then realizes he is exactly, you know, what he
Yeah.
fears he has always thought he's been, right?
Yeah.
And as much as he's always tried to break free, it was just a perfect ending. Like I said, that movie was just very well thought out. I mean, everything that went into it, it was a brilliant, brilliant film. That is his masterpiece, in my opinion. Certainly wasn't Snowpiercer. That movie sucked, but
Which I've not seen it. I've not seen it.
don't waste your time. I don't like it at all.
Unless it's on the IMDb top 100, and then we have no choice
No,
to watch.
it's not.
Okay, so I think that wraps it up really well there. So, last and final question to you is, what are we doing next?
Well, I was looking at the IMDb list and I see number 64 is being The Lives of Others. So that is a movie I've never seen.
Same, same. The Lives of Others it is then. So we'll try and upload. So this we seem to be doing sort of a 2 week thing at the moment. So if anybody's watching this, head on over to your streaming services and try and find The Lives of Others. And me and you will watch it once or possibly twice, depending on how good it is. And then we'll be here for the next episode where we'll be shooting the breeze about The Lives of Others. Brilliant. Isaac, thank you so much. This has been fun.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
I'll catch you in the next one.
Awesome. Have a good one.